Now that the Spanish cruisers have been in the game for quite some time, and I've had a little bit more time to extensively play the legendary tier Castilla, I think it's becoming one of my favorite cruisers at the tier, especially since the San Martin and the Pan American line has been so tragic. This one is based around a unique gimmick that I think actually has some good value to it, unlike the enhanced sonar consumable that the Pan American line is based around. I don't think there's too much value to that. But the Ready Rack, featured on the Spanish cruisers and the Castilla in particular, that does help. And historically, I was running the Spanish cruisers with Pascual at the helm, using his unique legendary skill called Honorable Sacrifice, which reduces the reload time of the main battery guns by 40%, but in exchange gives you 3 salvos in the ready rack instead of the base 2. I've gone away from that skill in this battle and substituted it for fully packed. I'll show you the build here, although I'm not entirely convinced that I'm totally sold on the build. You'll note that my inspirations are Mikawa and Sims. Mikawa, I think, is good because, of course, he buffs the concealment, and I think that's valuable on any cruiser in the game. Sims was more to make up for the shortcomings of the Honorable Sacrifice skill, because while it gives you the 3 salvos in the ready rack, the opportunity cost is not taking fully packed in the legendary row, and so you only have 2 heals base. William Sims, of course, gives you a little bit of extra HP based on what tier you're at, and with this build, I have 59,600 HP. Castilla's base HP is 56,000. Not too much of a difference, but that 3.6k difference may be the barrier between sinking and not sinking. In fact, I think near the end of this battle it's actually going to be, although I might get away from Sims on this build and substitute him for somebody like Mimbelli. Because the Castilla, along with I think the majority of the Spanish cruiser line, actually received a small buff in the May 2026 update. It was just a buff by 1 second to its main battery reload time. The base reload used to be 26 seconds, and now, it used to be 24 seconds, now it is 23. Although our reload time on the Castilla here is going to be much shorter than that. You can see there when the guns just shot at the SOM that the reload time is actually about 17 seconds. I think it's a little bit north of that though, maybe 17 and a half. The reason for that is twofold. 2 skills on Pascual Cervera y Topete. The first one is in his second row called Forewarned Concern. It reduces the cruiser main battery reload time by 10% when you're spotted, although it increases the firing penalty, which is normally 20 seconds for any ship, by 35%. So it does take us a little bit longer to go dark. And then in the third row, we've got the on second thought skill, which allows us to switch shell types when the main battery is fully reloaded in about 8 seconds. Kind of useful when you've got 2 AP salvos ready to go at any given time, and they can be devastating to cruisers. But it also reduces the main battery reload time in general by 5%. So instead of a 23-second reload, we're sitting at 19.5 seconds, and then we fire basically twice every single salvo. The delay between each salvo in the ready rack is only 2.5 seconds. And here you see that on second thought skill coming in handy, chambering the AP in anticipation of the Drake giving us broadside, although I don't think he ever does. And of course, on the Castilla, these are 254 millimeter main battery guns, which is larger than the typical heavy cruiser of only 203 millimeters. And it allows them to do things like overmatch the super light cruisers. Think Brisbane, Minotaur. If you ever encounter one of those in the Castilla, it is very good at taking them out, although the same could be said for Napoli and the like. Anyway, Drake doesn't really give us broadside, but there's a lot of ships here, so we don't want to be too crazy about this. The red team, though, has lost two of their destroyers, which of course gives us a huge advantage, but as you can see, the majority of the enemy team is actually in this cap. Drake over there, broadside to our position, a perfect target if we had the AP ready to go. But instead, we have Preussen out there, and there was one unspotted cruiser and a battleship in the area as well, so I think we do have to be careful. Preussen is probably the biggest threat to us due to his super accuracy and 457 millimeter guns. They can overmatch the armor scheme in a lot of places, although somehow I think we're going to be able to be protected reasonably well once we engage him a little bit later on. Laria, though, that is a scary opponent indeed. Not only can he overmatch the armor scheme pretty much everywhere, just like the Preussen, but unlike the Preussen, he'll shoot the sap, and the sap never overpenetrates like the AP, so I find it tends to hurt more, and the Laria is a very scary customer indeed. There's Drake over there, still sort of angled to us, and we only have the rear turret on target, but we can get a couple nice resets as he's reversing away with just the rear turret of Justice. The turret traverse on this thing isn't too bad either. It's only 23.8 seconds on this build, and that's in spite of the reload mod being in the 4th slot, which of course nerfs the turret traverse by something like 12%. Once again, using on second thought to switch to the proper shell type, because I think this time we will actually get broadside from an enemy cruiser, the Worcester over there, who appears to be putting our friendly destroyer teammate in mortal danger. We want to try to save that guy, and it doesn't work out too well. We do get 2 citadels on the Worcester, but it's not enough to take him out, and I wonder if the island maybe blocks some of our shells there. Nevertheless, I think our destroyer teammate here is going to get away unscathed, and I assume he's the one responsible for flipping the Bravo cap, which continues to remain in blue hands now that Drake has been dispatched. But still, we've got the majority of the enemy team on this side of the map. They've lost a cruiser now to go with their 2 sunk destroyers, so I think we're in pretty good shape as long as we don't do anything foolish. I don't know what's happening on the other side of the map either. It looks like there's 2 red battleships over there versus 2 blue ones, or maybe 3 actually. No, 2 of them. And then the rest of us are all over here. We have 1 destroyer well behind enemy lines. Not exactly sure what he's doing, but it looks like we're about to potentially take out Montana here. And then we've got Preussen and Worcester both behind the island directly in front of me. I was thinking maybe we could come around the corner here, get some torpedoes in the water, and just wait for Preussen and Worcester to inevitably push around the rock as the friendly destroyer goes in toward Montana, and that other one out there smokes up for reasons that are beyond me. Montana actually takes out the Vermont, and we've lost 3 ships to the enemy's, well, 5 now. As soon as I say that, 1 goes down, so only 4 left alive, 2 of which are right behind this rock. And I think, well, it doesn't look like Preussen or Worcester is inclined to come around the corner for some reason, so maybe we ought to go and meet them. I've found that the Castilla is pretty effective in close quarters combat, and you would think we've got everything stacked against us, going up against a Preussen with his ultra-accurate main battery guns that can overmatch the armor scheme everywhere, but, well, maybe not quite. I don't know why we have the AP chambered either. Maybe we ought to be using the HE, or maybe we're thinking we're going to catch Worcester broadside around the corner. Even Preussen broadside might not be that bad. These are, again, 254 millimeter guns, and the AP damage is actually quite substantial. It is 6,300 if you hit the Citadel. That's pretty good for cruisers of this kind. And as you can see, we do a number to the Preussen's broadside. The battleship behind us does more, of course. But Preussen, for his part, he is not going to be able to completely sink us. I think our 40mm icebreaker on the bow is probably going to prevent him from actually hitting the Citadel. He can still overmatch the armor above it, but if he doesn't deal critical damage, we can continue floating. And there you go. See, we don't take a citadel or anything like that. Same can't be said for Worcester. There's a bunch more citadels to go with the ones we originally got. AP was definitely a good call there. And of course, we still have torpedoes on either side of the ship, so in brawling range of the Preußen, we'll just dispatch those torpedoes. And the power of this AP can even permanently, or temporarily, I guess, disable the Preußen's main battery. He, of course, can permanently disable ours. Can we get that out of the game, Wargaming? Only temporary disablement of modules, please. Not permanent, so that way we're not without 1/3 of our firepower in this situation. Doesn't matter, though. The torpedoes are all the firepower we need. The flooding, I think, takes out the Preußen. And we end this battle with 165,000 damage. Nice result in the newly buffed Castilla. I think if you're disappointed like I am in the Pan-American line, you might consider playing the Spanish a little bit more often, especially this ship. I think it's just nice, solid damage output at the tier, particularly if you don't go, well, actually, it's solid either way if you go for Pasquale's unique skill that gives you 3 salvos in the ready rack or not. But I think having 2, maybe this is the way to go with the fully packed skill. We end the battle with nearly 3,000 XP, and just an overall good result, a fun ship to play, effective at dealing damage, especially great against broadside cruisers with the ready rack. And I really like it. I think I'll continue to play it as time goes on. It'll probably be one of my more played cruisers at the tier, to be honest with you. Hope you enjoyed the video. If so, give it a thumbs up, consider subscribing if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.